When you look at the view from the city of Jerusalem and you look out across to the north, you see a ramp almost. It's called the Patriarchal Highway. It's the route that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and the prophets would walk. It was the connection point between the Jezreel Valley and places like Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Beersheba. It was places where Jesus and his disciples would minister along. It would take them through Samaria. It would take them through down to Jerusalem. Sometimes they'd go down through Jericho and come up that way. They would do various things, but that main highway, that Patriarchal Highway, was a narrow path. And what's interesting about that is that the city of Jerusalem was not an easy city to attack. When you think about the Philistines who lived down on the coastal plains, and the Romans and the Syrians that came from the northeast, they were famous for their warfare and their methods of warfare, which always included chariots. The interesting thing about a place like Jerusalem is you can't use your chariots here, because there's only one way in that really works for an army to attack Jerusalem. It's from the north. It's this ramp that leads to Jerusalem called the Patriarchal Highway, but it's a narrow path. It's not an easy path for armies to travel. Armies at times would try to attack from the west or from the east or the south, and it was difficult. It was difficult terrain. It would wear the armies out, and the advantage was for the Israelites. They knew the hill country, and they could attack and keep people back from coming into the city. Now, when you look at that ramp and you see that narrow path, it's also important that you understand the Jezreel Valley. The Jezreel Valley is a wide, open plain surrounded by to the south by places like Mount Carmel and Megiddo. To the north, it would be Nazareth and the ridge where Jesus, when he first began his ministry, they tried to throw him from that cliff. It's that place where armies would march through in mass, where the tradesmen from every continent, from every culture would travel through. And if you lived in that area, you were exposed constantly to all of those cultures, all of those influences, all of those religions. And if you weren't careful, you could begin to see your own faith as one of the many faiths. You could begin to see that it might be important for us to be more broad-minded, to see more equality in religions. The closer you were to Jerusalem, where the temple of God was, where the presence of God was, in the Holy of Holies, very little influence came from the outside world, because it wasn't an easy place to go to. Tradesmen, if they had something to trade in Jerusalem, they would come. But they didn't go through Jerusalem on their way to other places in the world. Armies didn't march through. And so you had a high concentration of very religiously devout people in this area. So when we consider the broad valley and the influences of the world, the religions and the pagan cultures of the world that clearly influence people. I mean, it's been proven that apostasy of the faith happened more frequently, more often, a higher percentage with those who lived in those areas than those who lived close to Jerusalem, the heart of God. And so it's the scripture in Matthew 7 that Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he knows that they have that picture in their mind. You can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for many who choose it. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few ever find it. It makes sense when you're on the journey in the land. You begin to see how Jesus used the land to illustrate how important it is for us to stay close to the heart of God, to measure carefully the influences of the world on our life, to consider really how much time we spend with the world, and to the degree that we let its influence dictate our thinking. It's not easy to follow Jesus. It doesn't mean that we should stay away from the world. Clearly, Jesus and his disciples spent a lot of time in the Galilee, near Capernaum, where the world was passing by. But Jesus was trying to make a point that it's more difficult to walk with him, to journey with him, than it is to just let yourself be carried by the influences of the world. A journey is a deliberate choice. A journey is a decision to stay close to the heart of God. It's a decision to not see every religion as equal. It's a decision to not let the world influence us apart from our understanding of what the Bible tells us. We can't just look at this as something the preacher uses once a week. It's got to be our map for everyday living. And as we do, we stay on that path that is difficult for the enemy to reach. We stay close to the heart of God, where the influences of the world have a difficult time getting to us. We still live in the world, clearly. And Jesus said, go into the world and preach the gospel. But we have to be careful on this journey about what influences us. It's a narrow, difficult path, Jesus said, to journey with him. But it's worth it.